What manifestation is the ability to imagine and or vision merged with consistent focus with consistent faith.
Hey, Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing good. And yourself?
Good. Nice to have you on our show, Beyond Boundaries. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us.
Yeah, it's sincerely my pleasure. I know you guys are off to an awesome mission, so I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, we're really excited. And you definitely are a true testament to struggles and success and more struggles and then success again. And for those of you who don't know who Stephen is, he's a entrepreneur. He has multiple businesses, 7, I believe. Now he's an author. He has a top podcast called Unstoppable. He's a true inspiration to so many people, but it took a while to get there. So
You say that again. Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I would love to share your story. So if you want, we could just dive right in.
Yeah, absolutely. You lead where you want to go, and I'm happy to go on the journey.
All right. Well, you know what? Why don't we start from the beginning? Like, tell us about your childhood.
Oh gosh. My childhood, unfortunately, I used to think I was unique, but I've discovered that my childhood is the similar childhood to about 50% of the American population. Coming from single parent household, coming from parents who at the time were very unhealthy for themselves. My father struggled with alcoholism for a number of years. My mother suffered from all kinds of I wouldn't call it permanent mental illness, but illness in the sense that it caused her a lot of trauma and a lot of things early on. She grew up in a very difficult environment herself. And like anything, like any time else, when you have two unhealthy people try to have a healthy relationship, it ends up becoming nitroglycerin to a kind of thing. And lo and behold, by the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old, my mother and father were largely out of the picture. My mother had to leave to deal with some mental illness. And my father, essentially between alcoholism, he relocated to the Colorado area for a number of years. And that left me with my little brother and I with my grandmother. And at 9 years old, I remember her coming to me and asking her to ask me to help her be man of the house. And for Southern folks, man of the house means you're supposed to do all the things that, typically a father figure or a husband would do. And now, granted, I'm 9 years old. I got a GI Joe in one hand and a transformer in the other. So I don't, I'm not sure what that is, but I could see the care, concern, and disconnect in her eyes. I didn't realize, I later found out, I didn't realize then that when she had that conversation with me, she had just been diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, wow.
And inoperable cancer. And she knew she was going to die. Like she knew that, now she went through extensive chemotherapy. This is back in the 80s, right? So, chemotherapy then was nowhere near as sophisticated as now. So just going through chemotherapy could kill you just in, by itself. And, that afternoon, she taught me to literally grab a black kitchen chair all the way from the table. And then we toted it over to the stove and she taught me how to boil water. And then she taught me how to put macaroni and cheese in boiled water. Then she taught me how to put oatmeal in boiled water. And then she taught me how to basically if I could boil water and it could be created, I learned to begin to cook for ourselves. Now, granted, I would tell you today that I'm not someone who that enjoys cooking for myself. I'm much more of a DoorDash kind of guy, just because I'm typically on the go and all over the place. But in that time frame, it was kind of being fast forwarded to adulthood. And I find that a lot of folks that come up from broken homes are fast forwarded to adulthood, or if they're not fast forwarded to adulthood, they're absolutely fast forwarded into survivorship, right? They go into survival mode really deeply, really quickly. And they don't even realize it. They also don't realize that survival mode, while serving them in that moment, will one day need to be surrendered and given up. Right. So one of the biggest things that I've had to work through the last 5 to 8 years is realizing that I don't have to operate on that program anymore.
Right.
Now, granted, it created tenacity and drive and ambition and If it's to be, it's up to me kind of mentality and all that kind of stuff, which served me early on in my early entrepreneurship journey. But then it began to take a toll on a lot of my, close relationships and business stuff as I began kind of building things up. But you fast forward from that standpoint, my grandmother passes away at 11. I go live with my father. My brother goes to live with my mother in Florida. So we're split up as kids. I immediately got literally, I think my dad picked me up on a Thursday, and I think I went to school on a Friday and I went to work on a Saturday, and grew up in the construction industry, carrying studs and, doing construction related activities for a long time. He was a framer by trade. And, by the time I was 16, I'd already been doing it so long that I could actually run framing crews. So I had people that were twice my age, quote unquote, I'd say taking orders, not taking orders, taking directives, for me, because I could read blueprints and they couldn't read blueprints. Right. Around 17 years old, I meet my first mentor, a guy by the name of Steve Myrick. We call him Old Man Myrick since, his name is Steve, my name's Steve, keep the confusion down to a minimum. And he came to me one afternoon and had been watching me struggle for a while because my father was not great with money. And because of that, he made very, very bad financial decisions. It cost him his business. We went through bankruptcy, we went through repossessions, we went through foreclosure, we went through all those different things. And I think Steve was starting to see that I was kind of starting to head down that path of being someone who would borrow but not repay, and I think he saw how hard I worked, how diligent I was. I've always been a hard worker by trade. I don't know why. My father was a hard worker. Like, it was nothing for him to get up at 5 a.m. and basically from dusk till dawn kind of mentality. And for some reason, he decided to pour into me. One afternoon, he pulls me down the framing crew, puts me in his Jeep, and he said, I got a couple of questions for you, and they're very important. I said, okay. And of course, I'm just happy to be like enjoying the AC, like, because it was a hot day. I'm like, just let it come on, Jesus, let's go. AC. Of course, I'm, during the summertime, you stay sunburnt the entire summer. Because construction guys, I was the typical construction guy with cut off shorts and wearing no shirt and whatever.
And you're like 17 at this time?
17 at that particular moment for sure.
Okay.
And he pulls me down, we get in the car, and he kind of sets the stage, and he says, the first question is what is the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And like a foolish kid, because I said, well, duh, it's money, of course, because Steve Myrick had money. My dad didn't have any money, and we were taught that rich people were evil, and if you were going to be a person of integrity or have value, that that you kind of live in, like, it was just the bizarrest thing that culturistically still exists today in a lot of families, right? Now there are people that with wealth that do a lot of bad things with wealth, but there's also a lot of really good people that do really good things with wealth. And as part of that, you're going to pick up on what it is you're, in theory, you're going to pick up over time, because money just makes you more of what you already are. Right. So if you're a generous person, you're going to give a little more. If you're someone who's, backstabbing and whatever, you're just doing it scale. As he asked me that question, I was, it kind of felt like he wanted to, like, he snapped at me, and I think he would have popped me in the back of the head if he could have reached me, to be honest. And he said, no, it's absolutely not. It's the way they think. And then he says something that, like, I think began the change of my mentality, which was, do you want to learn to think like me, or do you want to continue thinking like your father? Right. So kudos to him for being so direct with me. It might be why I'm as direct as I am. I'm a very direct individual nowadays. It could have come from my faith or whatever. There's a lot of different twists and turns in my story, but I remember in that moment, I was thinking through all the different segments. Like, I remember watching Steve just be super generous to people. I remember him being able to go pay cash for things and go travel wherever he wanted to go, and always still being a very hard worker and being very diligent, being a good steward of resources. Meanwhile, I remember, I was having these memories of my dad borrowing money with no intention of repaying. My dad using my name on a light bill, to get the lights turned back on, or, all these different foolish things that people who are in survival mode will do because they think it's their only way to survive. And in reality, they're there because they're living by the wrong principles. And that's what Steve was trying to help me understand, is like, principle-based living will always lead to promise-based purposes. Okay.
Principle-based living. Say that
living,
again.
always promise-based purposes. So every principle governs a promise. So for example, you want to be wealthy, then okay, well, principle number one is to stop spending more than you make, because you don't have overflow and you can't invest what you don't have. You can't put that money to work with you, right? Principle number two is for everything that you do, look for an ROI. For every dollar I use, I expect three in return, unless it's charity or giving or something like that. So all of these different things began to slowly take shape. And I wish I could tell you that I went from that moment and then I learned all my lessons and life was going to be great. And, he was my mentor for life. And the reality was shortly thereafter, he put me in business for myself after having to drop out of high school to pay the bills and some stuff like that with my family. And lo and behold, I did really, really well for about a year. I
Okay.
made a lot of money as a basically still a teenager. Never been taught how to handle money. So what do? You let your insecurities drive your behaviors,
Right.
right? And because your insecurities drive your behaviors, you end up broke.
Right.
And long story short is I'm a big believer in faith. And I believe that if you get to a place where your arrogance exceeds your achievements, then what happens is the next thing you know, you're going to be humbled.
Right. Oh,
I went,
absolutely.
and I went through a major humbling. It led me to homelessness. And then, I was there for a few months and finally realized, hey, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I like. I remember having this moment in a public restroom, looking at myself at a local gym, like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, like I'm not even 20 yet. Right. And like, I'm thinking my life is over. I'm like, what? Like, you get stuck in these mental loops until you have a leverage point to release you from the mental loop. Fortunately for me, the conversation that Steve and I had a year and a half prior popped up in my head. Right. And that started the change. A few weeks later, I found my faith. A couple of weeks later after that, I started my next business out of a construction trash pile. That business alone last year did well into the significant 8 figures. And yeah, so God is good. And my journey has not been easy, but in hindsight being 2020, it has been worth it.
Yeah, it has been a journey. It rolled more like a roller coaster, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So I just, I'd like to touch on that faith thing that for a second. So you said you found faith. So you weren't, part of a church or religion. You weren't brought up with it.
Well, for me, like early childhood, God was always part of life, but it was in loose dialogue. It wasn't like everybody consistently went to church every Sunday or whatever like that. At 9 years old, I had my first commitment to Christ. And then it was my choice. It's something I wanted. It was just before my grandmother, actually just before my grandmother told me about her illness.
Okay.
Got baptized in the whole deal. In fact, she was so sick when I got baptized, she couldn't actually come to the baptism. And then from the time I was 9 till the time I was about 20, I had enough life adversity come at me where I was so angry with whatever this God power was supposed to be. I was like, if you're God and you're loving and you're real, then how come, we're losing our house, we're losing our car. My grandmother died. My dad's hadn't been around. Like all these different reasons why God would not be true, essentially. And I went on an atheistic journey for a number of years. And then I want to say it was just before I had my I call it my litter box moment. That's a whole other story. But this moment where I was intertwined with the divine, so to speak, in that I finally surrendered myself to God, to Jesus in this case. And before that time frame, from the time of for the first interaction of pain until the last interaction of perceived pain, was approximately 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
And over the course of 7 or 8 years, I went through a process of, investigating information to prove God didn't exist. But I would always investigate just enough to prove he didn't exist and not keep going, even though there was much more to go to. So my grandfather got a hold of me just before Jesus did, I guess you could say. And he said, I remember him telling me one time, he said, because I said something about monkeys and dinosaurs or something like that. He goes, son, if we evolved from monkeys, then there would be no monkeys, there'd be only people. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, well, interesting. That's kind of an interesting take. I've never heard that before. And the next thing he said was, you're going to have to learn to look past the answers that you want. A lot of us,
Mhm.
a lot of us in life, relationship, finance, faith,
Right.
we only go after the information that already supports whatever our bias is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was the awakening.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, first of all, so many people do that. I do that. Like if there's something, I have an ailment and I go on the internet, I look for the thing that I want it to say. There could be 20 reasons why I have this pain in my thumb, but
Yeah.
of course I have cancer and they're going to have to amputate it because that's what I'm looking for, right? Just you go for whatever it is you're looking for, which now I know that's the worst thing in the world to do because you're just
Yeah,
bringing it into your life. So that I had to make some adjustments up here
for
to
sure.
change the way I think. And, I have to go back now to the litter box comment
Mhm.
that you made. What is that about?
Oh gosh, that's a longer story. So you're gonna learn very quickly that my life reads a lot like Forrest Gump, uh,
Okay.
or like Joseph from the Bible, depending on your level of faith. In that, I'm one of God's more stubborn children. Um, Sometimes he has to hit me with a 4x4 or 2x4 to get my attention. I wish that wasn't the case, and I wish I had learned my lessons by now. But I'm better at it now than I used to be. So I'll take progress over perfection. But
As long as you're learning from it each time.
yeah, for sure. No, eh, after almost taking my life at a bridge, um, and kind of like waking myself up. I was coming out of the homeless scenario. It was kind of all that trauma, all that stuff all at one time. And again, it's so intertwined. It's really hard to determine sometimes what happened first, the chicken or the egg
Right.
kind of thing. But I had been without financial resources for a number of years. Um, at least for a good 2 years where like I was paycheck to paycheck, doesn't even describe it. Like it was like every now and again get some money for something, right? And I've been going without money for a long time. And my brother had moved into the mobile home that I technically owned on paper to take over the mortgage payment. Now, keep in mind, this mobile home was $276 a month. That was the extent of the mortgage on this thing. Um, and obviously I was in a position I couldn't pay it, so he moved in and whatnot. But a few months later, he calls me at my dad's house. I'm finally couch surfing on my dad's house. This is kind of as I'm coming out of the homeless. This is all like kind of wrapped up together, and invites me to clean his litter box for $50. And I'm
Wow.
like, $50 in the late '90s was good money. I mean, it wasn't bad money. It was like having $100, right? It was like,
Right.
it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't bad money. I think gas was like $1.78 or something like that then, or something like in the dollar
Yeah.
seventy category.
The
Um,
good old days.
yeah, right. And what do you do? I mean, I'm down on my luck. I'm just now starting to get a semblance of myself. I'm now starting to discover who I am. I'm now starting to wake up the potential that I may actually have some potential, even though I haven't done anything with it yet. Um, And, so I agreed. And I go up to the mobile home and I go up the stairs. I open the door. I walk to the door. I can smell ammonia like a mile away, like super, like it hit me at the front door. It didn't have me at hello. It had me at ammonia. And, yeah, I walked to the door, turn a left, going, kind of in the middle of the living room, to left and to the right, past the kitchen, past the laundry room on the right, through the single door of the master bedroom, and then through the double doors into the master bathroom that was in the master bedroom.
Right.
And opened the door and saw the nastiest litter box I've ever seen in my entire life. It's like he forgot to pour. They didn't clean it. They just kept pouring sand on top of what was
Oh.
already there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was overflowing. It was nasty. I took the little Walmart bag that I had in my hand and basically dropped it. Went to the kitchen, got a garbage bag. And I remember thinking to myself, it's like, this is what my life has come down to. It's like cleaning up cat crap. Like, this is my life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, this is before I recommitted myself, and this moment is when it began to change. And so I kind of sit down, I kind of grab the scooper, I start scooping stuff, as quickly as I can. I want to get it over with as quickly as I can. And about that time, the back of the scooper actually catches a big clump and snaps the handle off the scooper. And of course, I'm already like, this is disgusting. This is nasty. I'm already angry. Like I'm already an angry individual,
Right.
if that makes any sense going into this
Yes.
moment. And that just made me angrier. I threw the handle down on the ground. What I wanted to do was get up and leave. Problem was I needed money. Right. So I put my thumb in the back of the scooper and I went back to it. Okay. And of course that was not pleasant. And as I'm going through it and going deeper and deeper and quicker, the next thing I know, the corner of the scooper, because it was a square head, catches the corner of the bag and rips a 2-foot hole in the bag. So everything that I'd already picked up, plus what was already still there, went all over the place. And at that particular moment, now keep in mind, I had been saying I didn't believe in God, saying I didn't believe in all this kind of stuff for a long, long time. It's been several years, right? Because again, I could not comprehend how, if God was real, why would I suffer the way I was suffering?
Right.
Now, hindsight being 2020, I know what he did with all that stuff.
Right.
But I remember, I just as soon as that happened, everything went on the floor. I threw the scooper on the floor and I just started yelling at the top of my lungs, every obscenity you can think of, yelling at the ceiling. Now, keep in mind, I'm yelling at a God that I'm saying doesn't exist. Okay. And I'm going to town. And the interesting thing happened about the time I opened my mouth to start the cursing, so to speak. I don't know if you've ever seen or ever watched a lot of the Rocky movies. I used to love Rocky.
Yeah.
But all right. So Rocky, at the end of most movies, after he's done his new training and he's getting ready to go into his next battle, and we all know that Rocky's going to win in the end, but we're all like, whatever. And then he's like with Ivan Drago, the big Russian guy or whatever. And he's like, you get to the end of the show and he's like, hit me right here. Hit me right here. Right. And of course, and Rocky's just taking punch after punch after punch. There was a divine presence in that room that felt like it was doing just that. I felt like I was Ivan Drago and I was hurling as many assaults as I possibly could at this divine presence. And this divine presence, just no words. It just said, it almost felt like, all right, let's get it out of you. Keep coming.
Yeah.
A little more time, a few more times. Come on, one more punch. Come on, it's almost out. Let's go. Almost like that kind of mentality. And then I uttered a few words that changed my life forever. And that was, if you're so blankety blank real, why don't you prove it? And I was not expecting a response.
Of course not.
But somehow I found myself on my knees, pinned to the floor. And out of the quietness of the entire moment, I heard, "Are you ready to surrender?" Super pleasant, super quiet, super loving, super compassionate, but super firm. And I don't know about you, but if you're pinned to the floor and you can't move, you kind of have no choice. Like I didn't, at that time, the choice was already made for me, basically.
Right.
Again, I wasn't expecting a response.
Right.
And, I agreed in that moment that I was ready to surrender. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of carrying all that hurt, all that pain, all that disappointment. I was tired of judging my entire life or living my entire life as a victim. Right. I instinctively knew there was more. I wasn't sure how to get it. I wasn't sure what needed to change, except for in that moment, I knew then that I needed to change.
Right.
Right. And as I have changed over the course of decades now, I live my life very deliberately by a specific set of principles. But when this moment happened, it was like, as soon as I said yes, it was like somebody took a hot vat of oil, not like so hot it scalded you, but like hot, like warm, like honey, and poured it on the top of my head. And it just slowly creeped from the top of my head all the way to my toes. And people ask me, how long did it take? I'm like, I don't freaking know. I don't know if it was 60 seconds. I don't know if it was 60 minutes. Like, I have no idea. All I know is that when I got up off that floor, I felt clean. I felt whole. I felt at peace. I felt sure. I felt confidence. The insecure kid had largely passed away in that moment. And the grown man was starting to stand up. Right. And I say all that to say that people say, well, that sounds pretty far-fetched, dude. Like, I don't know about you, but I've never experienced anything like that. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, I hear you.
Right.
But one of the things this voice said to me in that moment was, after the moment of surrender, is that I was available now to receive a blessing. Because I wouldn't surrender, the blessing was always out of reach. And I think that holds true for everybody. I think the blessings are always out of reach because our ego is in the way of receiving the blessing itself. Does it make sense? So as I'm kind of going through this entire transition, one of the things that I would say is, it was only a week later that I started the company that became a very successful business out of the trash piles.
Right.
Right. So to me, you don't even have to look at the situation that I just described. Believe me or not believe me, I don't care. Like, it happened to me, so you can't take it away from me. But then look at the result.
Right.
The result itself says a whole lot. Right. So that's where faith comes into play.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that story. I had no faith because of my childhood and my teenager. I mean, pretty much almost my whole life. And it's just recently that I found faith. I surrounded myself with different people. I wanted to do different things because it wasn't working for me. And I wasn't planning on it. But just like you, a couple of moments that were undeniable that I can't explain. And my life has turned around since then. And you can't articulate it to anybody who really doesn't believe or doesn't understand it. Because if you told me your story 20 years ago, I'd be like, this guy's, crazy. Like, what's he talking about? Like, felt some warm, honey hugging him after he, after
I know it sounds strange. I get it.
Like, this sounds crazy. So, but I get it. And it's so true. And I believe that you have to go through the fire like you did as a child, as a teenager in your 20s to get to the place where you can actually make a difference in other people's lives. Because if you don't go through that, you don't understand it, and you can't feel what they're feeling.
The fire only lasts as long as the non-surrender does.
Very true.
Okay. So the quicker you can get to a place of humbling yourself to understand that you are in your own way, which regardless of your past, right? Regardless of your past, like you could have been through some very horrific things. And I would understand that. I would empathize with that. I would have compassion on that. But I would also say that as long as you feel there, you live there.
Right.
Right. So if you want something new and you want something to become more of your mainstay, more beautiful in your own life, you're going to have to surrender yourself to the place of knowing that you don't know it all. You don't. Right. Because if you knew it all, let's look at a financial example. Let's assume for a second you make $50,000 a year. Okay, great. Yeah, great. Awesome. But you have aspirations of becoming a billionaire.
Right.
Okay. Great. Also great. But yet you run around telling your friends all the time that no one knows me better than I know myself. Whatever blind spot they're bringing up, you're like, no, that doesn't exist. Which, by the way, those two comments are very narcissistic in nature. Okay. The reality is if you operated like a billionaire today, you would already be a billionaire.
Right.
You wouldn't be making $50,000 a year. And again, no harm, no foul. Whatever your income is, and that's great. Just keep going, right? Build the best life you can build. What I'm getting at is if you don't learn to open yourself up to people that are in front of you that have already been through what you've been through, and come out on the other side with character and integrity. I'm not saying like all because someone has money, do what they do and say what they say and kind of act as they act, because you need to determine, does this person have character or not?
Right.
However, if all of that checks out and someone's trying to teach you a better way, but you're resistant to learning the better way, then who's really in your way?
You yourself. right? You're the only one that's ever in your own way.
Yep.
And yeah, if you imagine that you're a billionaire, you are doing everything that you love to do in life, eventually the universe will put you in a place to get that, but you have to be ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you get thrown into a situation where, oh, all of a sudden you wake up and you're a billionaire, I don't win the lottery or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not ready for it,
That'll go bye-bye really fast.
you're never going to keep it.
So let's talk about manifestation for a second, because people use that word all the time. I want to manifest. I'm going to manifest this. I'm going to manifest that. What manifestation is the ability to imagine and or vision merged with consistent focus, with consistent faith. That if I do the right thing at the right time in the right way, that it's all going to work out in the end. And lo and behold, things that you desire will begin to manifest themselves. Manifestation is not, I'm going to say, I own an airplane, I own an airplane, I own an airplane, I own an airplane, I own an airplane. But yet you get up right then and you go out to clubbing with your friends, or you get up and you spend the only $5,000 or $10,000 that you know on some weird thing rather than investing it.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
You have to take everything that you envision with your life and merge it with principle-based living.
Right.
You learn principles from people that can teach you principles.
Right. Action is such a big portion of it, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people think manifesting is like what you said. You just think, oh yes, you're going to, meditate, you're meditated into your life. And the biggest part of that is actually taking action in that direction. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the other thing too is they get stuck there because they're expecting the universe, which is, by the way, a created thing. It is not a controlling thing, to somehow put something in their path. One of the biggest mistakes we make as human beings is we consistently worship created things rather than the person that created it.
Right.
So for example, when someone says I'm manifesting I'm praying to the universe, mm-hmm. the universe doesn't have the tools or the decision to give you what you want. Mm-hmm. The creator of the universe in alignment can absolutely give you everything that's in your heart and then some.
Right.
So are you worshiping the created, or are you worshiping the creator?
So it's a co-creation type of deal, right? We do it with God, with the spirit, with mm-hmm. the universe, whatever you want to call it. But we're partners, right? Yep. We have to go through this journey together. And, it's, the more people that I speak to, the more I realize that the people that go through tragedies or go through struggles in their younger years, they mm-hmm. end up being the most successful.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, but it's so true. It seems like the more struggles you had as a child or as a young adult, the more successful you are in the end.
Yeah. There was a quote. I'm going to butcher the quote, but Michelangelo said one time, because people were asking why he created sculptures. Mm-hmm. They're like, why, what are you doing? Like, why do you do that? Yeah. He goes, well, most people see a slab of marble. Mm-hmm. I see an angel trapped inside the marble. Oh. So life is a lot like letting go of your inner angel, getting your inner angel out, for lack of a better word. It only comes through the process of chiseling it away over time. Mm-hmm. It's why, for some reason, the happiest people that I know are not the wealthiest people that I know. Many of the wealthiest people I know are some of the most unhappy people I know. So that should tell you something if you're struggling to get by and whatever, and you're thinking one day when I have $1 bazillion, I'll be happy. That's just not true. Because money makes you more of what you already are. Right? At the same time, if you understand that life is more about chiseling away what doesn't need to be part of you, then you can focus on chiseling that away and becoming what is supposed to be part of you. It's a chiseling approach. So my entire life has been chiseled. Yeah.
And I'm sure you feel the same way I do. Is like, there's no end to it, right? You keep chiseling. You don't.
Well, but here's the thing: is the biggest chunks of the chisel happen at the beginning. So therefore, if you are going through a season of life where big chunks are falling away, then yes, you're going to continue to be chiseled, but your chisel marks become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, which is how joy and contentment and fulfillment increase over time.
That's what we're looking for, right? That's
Mhm.
really, the older I get, the more I realize I don't need the big fancy house and the
Mhm.
car and the fancy purses and the shoes that cost thousands of dollars. I don't need that stuff. I don't want it anymore.
Mhm.
I just want joy when I wake up.
Yeah.
Maybe that Louis Vuitton gives me happiness when I
Mhm.
look at it, like, but why does it give me happiness? It's because when I'm walking down the street with it, I get these looks from the outside that say, oh, look at her.
Mhm.
I feel
Which is
different,
actually feeding your insecurities. Yeah.
right? Which, if you don't have insecurities, then you don't need that stuff anymore.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I don't even want it. I've gotten rid of like almost
Yeah.
everything. Like, I don't care. I want to feel the joy. The happiness doesn't matter. That'll
Mhm.
come and go. But finding joy in the everything, the everyday, even
Yep.
in the pain, because I know now when I get hit with something and it causes some sort of pain, first I think about, why is it causing me that pain? And
Mhm.
second of all, I try to think, how can I grow from this?
Yeah. Well, and pain and pleasure are both indicators. Okay.
Right.
They're just indicators. They're not determiners of outcomes. Like, I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to always be one way or the other. The other thing too is a lot of times contentment and joy and fulfillment come from being consistent with where you are and being happy in that moment. Um, a lot of folks, again, they think when they get the bigger car, the bigger house, all this kind of stuff, that they're going to be like happy. What
Right.
they're really searching for, what I think every human being is searching for, is a divine connection, one, and then the ability to live free, two,
Mhm.
to make their own choices. Right.
Yeah.
If I wanted to get up today and go to the beach, I can get up and go to the beach today. Or
Right.
if I want to give away $1 million today to a charity, I can get up and get, like, it's the intent behind the pursuit. So, having a pursuit of wealth or wisdom or anything like that is in and of itself not bad. It's the intent. What's feeding it is the intent to get to a place where you can have overflow, where you're able to help a lot of people, or is the intent to get looked at and noticed by a lot of people?
Right.
And human nature, and I'm using myself as an example, human nature by nature has elements of that,
Right.
right? Because, again, I've got a good friend of mine. They were telling me this, they have a really hard time just receiving thank yous.
Mhm.
And I said, you know what? I did for a long, long time. They're like, well, how'd you overcome it? I just started saying thank you.
Yeah.
Like, I would hold my heart and I would just say thank you.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
For
Have
receiving it.
that
I'm receiving
gratitude.
that thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have that gratitude for everything. And real gratitude, not, oh, thank you, but really, thank you.
The trick in life is to learn to be present.
Mhm.
And that has been one of the greatest struggles of my life thus far, is to be present inside of every single moment. Rather, I was watching this TV show last night and they had this really interesting quote I thought was interesting. Um, and in this TV show, this one of the what do you call them, the heroes of the story or whatever. They've always for decades they've always been on the move, on ships going to and from and all these different places, right? And they had recently gotten married in this TV show or whatever. And he gets up and he's ready to go off and go move around some more. And she goes, ah, there you go again. He's like, what? Always going, never arriving.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
the being present is different than being on the go and never arriving. Being present is being arrived already in the moment.
Mm-hmm. That's so profound, because if you're not living in the moment, in every conversation that you're having with somebody, in everything that you're doing and smelling and feeling, you look back and you can't remember those moments. It's like they
Mm-hmm.
didn't exist, rather than actually having meaning in your life.
Yep.
And that's why we're here, is to have meaningful relationships and communication, and to fill each other's cups.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's so awesome. I have another question for you that it's just, if I don't ask it, I'll forget it. Going back to that moment, the litter box moment, and you all of a sudden had this shift. What were your next steps? Like, what would you say to somebody who's living that life, who doesn't know where their next meal is coming from, and they know they have to make a change? What do you suggest when they have no money?
My next steps were to break things down into bite-sized actions.
Okay.
So my very next step was get gainfully employed. Okay. So mowing a lawn, raking some leaves, washing some windows, picking up dog poop. Like, if you're literally that far along and you're struggling, it's about earning an honest income to get going.
Right.
Okay. It really kind of follows Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Get all your major needs taken care of first: food, shelter, finance, but live as lean as you possibly can. For me, I lived lean for 5 or 6 years. I got myself out of debt that I got myself into. I just went gangbusters at all that stuff.
Right.
Mainly because I felt like I owed it to myself. I entered into a lot of those agreements that I quote unquote financed, right? So it's so I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to be honest. And so step one is about just becoming instinctively aware of earning the income first. Step number 2 is, okay, identify what your passions are, what you're really good at. You might have to have some people tell you what you're really good at, because most of us don't realize what we're really good at. Go through a gifts and talents and strengths kind of discovery process, and then say what types of professions or businesses or whatever are in alignment with those things I'm really good at. Okay. And then after you get yourself to a certain level of stability, the next step is going to be able to pivot to the place where you're now employed by the thing you're actually created to do, or something you're really good at, to at least continue the process. My son asked me one time, he goes, well, he just graduated high school, so I don't know what to do. He tested college for 6 months or whatever, and it was like, that wasn't for him.
Yeah.
And I get that. Like, it wasn't for me either. But in doing so, he asked me, so what do I do? I said, you just need to go knock something over.
Yeah.
Like, you need to go get gainfully employed. You need to start learning to think on your feet, and you start learning to problem solve. You need to start remember the principle of the ROI, meaning every dollar you receive, you need to try to turn it into 3. Like, if you'll do those basic things consistently, then as your consistency is found, your confidence will rise. And as your confidence will rise, more opportunities will show themselves to you. So it's about literally breaking things down into bite-sized actions. So step number 1, go get gainfully employed. Step number 2, try to get gainfully employed in something that you actually know, like, and trust, and you enjoy doing. Right. Just go through a self-discovery process, an awareness process. So I think step number 3 is probably one of the easier ones, that we make more difficult than not, especially in today's times with YouTube and podcasts and books and whatever, which is get yourself a mentor.
Yeah.
Go follow someone that's been where you've been, or been where you are. Right. But then they've managed to come out the other side and learned a lot more lessons that you haven't learned yet. Because there's really only 2 ways in life to learn: by the things that you experience yourself, and by the things that other people have already experienced ahead of you.
Right.
One of them is more painful than the other.
Yeah, I think sometimes, though, we're pushed in a direction more by pain than by watching others. So I never want anybody to go through pain, but that's the quickest way to get there.
Yeah.
Right. It's the quickest. And I know you're an author, you have several books. I did notice that you have an ebook out that helps people to find clarity in it. I honestly, I'm going to download it. I haven't. I haven't.
Yeah, I think the one that I would recommend for everybody, and you can find it at my website, stephenscoggins.com, and just navigate to resources.
Okay.
There's a bunch of things you can choose from, but the one that I think is important for anyone who's on the early stages of having what I call the awakening is called The Number One Thing That's Driving You, or The Number One Thing Holding You Back.
Okay.
Grab
We'll
that
put
one
that in the
because,
comments too.
yeah, and because in that particular resource, it's not just an ebook. There's also a complete strengths, gifts, like assessment in there that is 80 pages on you.
Oh, lovely. Love
And we used to sell it for over $100,
it.
like
Mhm.
all the time, consistently. And I just kind of got to the place where I was like, look, I want more of my life to be more about a mission than margin.
Mhm.
Like I know that margin will come with mission over time, but I wanted it to be more weighted on the mission than the margin. So I went ahead and dumped that I went ahead and dumped that personality tool actually in the ebook that people can have for free.
Oh, that's awesome. I love how you give back. And is that because you had a mentor, you had somebody, helping you through the journey?
I think if you're truly on an awakening journey where you are having more self-discovery,
Mhm.
one of the byproducts of that is as you go through the process of self-discovery, you'll be more aware of other people in their journey. Like you'll be
Yes.
more aware of what they need. And then when you realize that you have the power to reduce the amount of pain that someone feels based on a principle, based on an ebook, based on a video or a podcast or having lunch with somebody or whatever, like when you realize that, you'll have no choice,
Yes.
right? There's something that changes inside of you that becomes more of a servant, rather than, hey, how can people serve me? The whole
Right.
how can people serve me, recognize me, promote me, or whatever, that never will lead anywhere, ever,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
ever. It'll leave you isolated and alone. Whereas becoming a servant, like a real servant, not like serving people in such a way that you compromise your values or who you are or
Right.
like get pushed all over, but like, part of doing this podcast today is just me trying to serve you and your audience. Like hopefully I'm sharing something that will be profound, but my heart
Oh,
is
I'm
show
sure.
up to do it.
I think if we could just get to one person, it doesn't have to be a million people. It'd be amazing if we could get to that point. Just one person, if we can help change their lives and help them see that they're here for a bigger purpose
Mm-hmm.
and give them hope. That's what I'm here to do.
Absolutely. Well, think about it this way. To kind of build on that point, Steve Mark was not a public figure.
Mhm.
No one knew who he was,
Mhm.
but now a lot of people know who he was because of me,
Right.
right? Steve Myrick, along with Susan Batts and one or two other people, changed my life forever. And now they get the compounded effect of every life that I actually change. Right. So someone asked me one time, what do you think you want to, what is your life's ambition? I said, well, to become Steve Myrick to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Right. Because what Steve did in the moment was he ended up creating a legacy that far outlived him.
Yeah.
Right. And he didn't do it through a TV show or through a pocketbook or some other product, good or service. He did it by the investment of presentness of person.
Right.
He was present with me. He saw what I couldn't see inside of me. He believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And he was willing to put up with all my shenanigans as I was going through the discovery process of becoming that. You see, a lot of times we get labeled with something and then we hold on to that label for life.
Right.
Right? He's an alcoholic. She's a drug addict. She's a I don't know. She sleeps around, or he sleeps around, or he went bankrupt, or like all these different labels. They're divorced, or like the
It's not
labels
who you
only
are.
have the labels only have the control or the power that you give them.
Right. Mhm.
Right? So either you're going to live in freedom or you're going to live in bondage. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to help people understand how to live in freedom.
Right. And you, every day when the sun comes up and you get out of bed, you can make a decision to be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be the alcoholic that maybe you were yesterday, or you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be that child that, your parents failed you when you're
Mm-hmm.
40 years old. You're not that person anymore. And it's okay. And you can reinvent yourself 1,000 times in your life. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter as long
Yeah.
as you're reinventing it to do bigger and better things and grow.
Yeah. If you're actually on a track record to become the best version of self, you're going to reinvent yourself about every 5 to 7 years.
It's beautiful and it's
Mm-hmm.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I laugh because a couple months ago, I overheard somebody, I was at a get together at an old friend's house that I haven't talked to in years and years, high school. And I overheard him say, oh yeah, to somebody else. I heard him say this. Oh yeah, that's Jill. She was so stuck up in high school. Like, I'm 50 now and we're talking about, and I wasn't stuck up. I was insecure. I didn't talk to anybody because I hated who I was. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done. I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. And almost every case, what people remember about us is actually tied to an insecurity that was actually happening within us in almost every case.
Every time. And if you can't see that as an adult in somebody else, then you've some growing to do yourself.
That's right. Well, and everybody's on their journey, so we can just be grateful for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, any last suggestions, any last things that you want to share to our guests that are listening today?
I think I would just share that you are where you are today because it's all you've allowed yourself to be. And if you're going to become something more, you're going to have to focus on becoming more. So books, podcasts, YouTube, whatever it takes to get you to open your mind, because as your mind expands, so will your life.
Yeah, there's so much free information out there. Like you said, with YouTube and Instagram, get off of those negative. Don't follow anybody negative. Don't follow any.
Well, and the algorithms are only going to feed you what you search. So,
right. So just keep searching those positive, people, mentors and coaches, and, keep on the path. Don't give up.
That's right. That's right.
Stephen, thank you so much. We'll make sure we put your information in the comments, and, check out his podcast and his free books. I mean, thank you so much for sharing and caring about others like you do.
It's sincerely my pleasure. Let's go out and make the world a better place.
Let's do it. Thank you.